Okay, in coloring our logo, we can see already that the tools in Illustrator are a little different and a little bit more specific than the layer styles tools in Photoshop. But Photoshop can be a useful way. I'll open up my layer styles one. A useful way to play with the different options that your black and white logo has. Basically, without effects, your black and white logo is your core identity design. And they often call this in graphic design identity design now, because it's used for much more than just traditional logo purposes. But then you'll see that same identity expressed in lots of different forms with lots of different variations. So for instance, if it's in full color with the ability to have texture and the ability to have soft edges in the printing, you could do it like this. But in other instances, you might not be able to do soft edges. So you might take off those and you would have only sharp edged examples. Or maybe you wouldn't be able to do the texture. And maybe you wouldn't even be able to do a gradient, and you would just be able to do a single color. And so you can vary these different techniques based on what the output is. That's how the layer style effects work, especially on vector objects, where the vector is perfectly clean to whatever size you want it to be. I made this, I believe, 600 pixels per inch. So highly refined resolution. What matters most is how it comes across for the purpose that you're using. So when you color your logo, you want to kind of think of what that purpose is. And instead of going all out with drop shadows and with really tricky effects, I just want this to be the color version of my black and white file. So that's my black and white. This is my color. But I want that color to add something and to be meaningful. And so far, I've just made a duplicate of the black and white logo, put it on a new layer on top, and then I've traded the black fill for what's called a gradient fill. Right? And I started with the orange-yellow gradient, and then I started changing colors. And if I want to keep messing with that gradient, I just select everything, and I can keep on replacing colors. And I can replace colors in a few ways. Not only can I change the actual color, I can actually change their opacity, allowing colors from underneath to come through. And by doing this, I can even add a new color and expand its range if I like that yellow. By doing this, I'm kind of seeing a theme I want that enhances not just the logo, but the actual kind of symbolic meaning of these leaves and the changing seasons, going from brown to green to kind of the fall colors of orange. Right. Now, because I took the opacity down on some of them, you'll see a slight grid behind it there, which means I can also play with an underline color. So if I go to my layers and I make another duplicate, so I'm going to lock my colors for a moment, unlock my flat black, copy it. Remember, you can't just do Command-J to duplicate. Command-J does something very different and not very helpful in Illustrator. And then on a new layer, once I have that new layer selected, I say Edit, Paste in Place. Then I can lock and turn off my bottom layer. And now I can play just with a new fill background. So if I do pink, or that kind of mauve-y color, that affects it in an interesting way. It doesn't affect the gradations that I left at 100%, but it does affect the browns. And it makes the browns slightly warmer and more inviting than the black alone. So there's lots of ways you can play with color. Also, I can modify the stroke, just like I did in Photoshop. So I'll start with a black stroke, black basic stroke. That's big enough to see. Why does it keep doing that? There we go. And you'll see what that does. So notice, because I have a stroke, where that stroke is seen, and I'm doing it on the purple layer underneath, it gives an emboss effect, just like in Photoshop, but just a different technique. So where the gradient color is less opaque, the stroke comes through and is overlapped by the gradient color. If I can make it variable width, I have to select it all first, go back to my layers. Again, it's all about careful selections, which is why I have my other layers locked, so I don't accidentally mess with those. And this keeps it really simple, but you just select that whole layer, which is that purple silhouette logo underneath, and then I can change the stroke to variable width. See if I like that more. Change it again. You just have all these different options to play with. To a thin to thick width, or change it again to something less basic, something maybe sketchier. I like what that does for the leaf. I'm not sure I like what it does for the deer's head. And this is kind of where Illustrator beats out Photoshop, because remember, Illustrator saves each of these shapes as an individual path. So I can use the small selection tool and just select, or even the large selection tool and just select this path, this one path, and use a different kind of stroke on that. And all of these are just added effects on top of your core black and white logo that you can add with coloring. Remember, your base identity should be pretty straightforward. That is too thick. Let's see. So I already have a 5-point round. Maybe just uniform, it would be best. So when you're designing your initial logo, I say be wary of using strokes, because those don't scale up. But when you're coloring, this is more for a specific purpose. So go ahead and use what you think you need. And if I like this, that kind of line weight, and I don't want to have that embossed effect on it, I can also apply that to that same path in this layer. So again, just selecting layer by layer and applying that stroke. It was uniform with a 5-point oval. And then I might think, well, I like that, but the color is too strong. You can also play with, just like you can in Photoshop, the color of the stroke. You have to select it first. All about careful clicking. And if you want more selection, just go off of web colors. So that's, instead of the black, that's kind of a nice deep burgundy color. And maybe I like that juxtaposition. If I wanted to apply that to these two shapes, I just use the large selection tool, hold down Shift, select both of them, and then I can actually use the eyedropper tool to match that stroke on both of them. Huh. I'm not sure why that's not doing what I want it to. And it looks like I have that stroke applied underneath as well. So this is why layers are all about your own management. Yeah, so that rough edge. Actually, I kind of like the combination of both. On those, the rough edge at the bottom and the clean edge on the inside. But I can try it without the rough edge, see what I think. Do I like that one better or that one better? I think I actually like that. So there's just so many options you can play with, and it's all about kind of knowing your options. Whoops, wrong one. And how to assert that creativity within the Illustrator program, which is very different than Photoshop. The capabilities there is just not as intuitive. All right, what if I wanted to do a drop shadow effect like I did in Photoshop? Because remember, all of these layer styles are vector effects. They will match any resolution. They're infinitely scalable. Well, what I would do then is go back to my core identity black and white logo underneath, lock my other options, unlock this, make a duplicate of it by copying it, making a new layer, and then pasting in place. Locking the one underneath, you see how useful it is, and then working from it. And now with this layer, just so you can see what I'm doing, I'll drag it to the top. Now with this layer, I am going to fill it with a gradation, but I'm going to use a different type of gradation, which is called fading sky. And that's because this gradation already has a 100% to 0% opacity built into it. And I can pick whatever color I want. If I want a drop shadow that's fairly muted, I might pick something like, actually kind of a deep greenish blue might be nice, but something pretty muted on this side of the scale. I can always adjust it here. I can take out all color if I want and just have black. That would be a straight, but I'm going to add a little bit of blue or cyan and yellow to give me a little bit of green to that drop shadow. All right. So now I'm going to fill the whole thing with that gradation. And I'm going to turn off the stroke because I don't want any of that showing. And that's kind of interesting. This is with that gradation on top of everything. But what I want to do is move it underneath and then grow it so it's a little bit bigger. So what I do is I use the large selection tool and I hold down Shift and I just drag out the corner a little bit in whatever direction I like to get that drop shadow effect. Now you see how it fades to non-existence on the right side, because this is, and goes sharp at the left. And that's because of the gradation that you set. So I can keep modifying that. I can play with the angle of it. just in a different way.